Welcome to Thone's Nibbles number 1. This is from Matthew chapter 1, and it's a summary of the genealogy. And this happened to have been written on August the 10th of 2020. Matthew 1:17 states, "So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. From David until the captivity in Babylon are 14 generations. And from the captivity in Babylon until the Christ are 14 generations." So that's the highlighted section. Now the explanation, which is in this case questions and answers. First of all, why was this written? Why did God bother to say these things? It's to emphasize the long-term plan of God for His people. Next, who was it written to? Target, It's to the new Christians to orient them in the sweep of history. In other words, the people of Jewish at the time, of Jewish extraction, were familiar with a great deal of this information, but as people are now going to be going out to the Gentiles, he needs to sort of set the situation in order for those people who may not have even heard of a person called Messiah. The connection to the previous and the next verses in this chapter. It summarizes those important and not who came before, and leads to the story of Christ's birth, which of course is the sort of the turning point between Judaism and Christianity. Why is the Holy Spirit included? It makes the story less disorienting for the Jewish converts, also more relatable to later Gentile Christians. What does this communicate? The rich historical relationship between God and His people. These were God's people. All the people that were listed just before this one we're looking at were God's people. They were kings and leaders of one sort or another. So now we're getting into the more personal part of this. What does this mean to me? The key to Hebrew history are summarized in these 3 groups. First, from the promise God made to Abraham and to the reign of the first good king, David. That's a long period of history, from Abraham to David. And this was a period of lifestyle. Most of it was time when the Hebrews were just sort of wandering around, or they were enslaved in Egypt, or there were problems. But then later, then finally there were 2 kings. And the second king was David. So the second section is from the reign of David until the exile. And this is a period of time that basically was most distinctly a declining quality in leadership. You had a decent leader in Saul. You had a great godly leader in David, and you had a wise leader in Solomon. So that was sort of the peak. You're coming up the hill, and that's Saul, and then David and Solomon are right at the peak there, each with David in his spiritual ways and Solomon in his wise ways were the sort of the peak of Hebrew history at that time. And then there was a quick slide downhill into when you get to Rehoboam. Rehoboam was the king. It was the son of Solomon and so on. And then, there were a few decent kings along the way, but nobody ever inherited that. And so that was a declining time. And then finally, the third section is from the exile into the coming of the only truly good man, Jesus. And so that was a time of uncertainty during the exile, and then a time of difficulty being controlled by the Romans. You had the Maccabean Wars, which were sort of an attempt to cleanse the place, and then finally the Roman time of control, which was the time when Jesus came. Why is this important? It's important because we see that all this is part of God's long-term plan. We do not have to worry. God has plans for His people. And that's the really good news for us today, is that no matter how difficult times may be, that God has a plan for a time when it won't be so. So that's the lesson for today, Matthew 1, and the next lesson will be in Matthew 2.